Hello and welcome to the EnSpirit podcast, where we inspire you to develop and enhance your entrepreneurial talents and skills. This series is packed full of information, tips and interviews that help you change and find the edge in your game. I'm your host, Beju Solanki. I'm a performance psychologist and I've been working with entrepreneurs and business owners for the last 25 years, helping them improve their game. To find out more information about me, please look on all social media platforms, but specifically Clubhouse and Instagram. Before we launch this week's episode, I'd love to tell you about the Change Your Game scorecard. If you're struggling to achieve what you really want and you're not sure where to start, the Change Your Game scorecard will help you identify where you need to improve. Life is a game, and there are 3 core games you need to conquer to succeed in life. That's the inner game, your mindset, your emotions, your thoughts. Your game plan, that's your strategy and your roadmap. And then your outer game, how consistent and persistent you are in taking actions. The Change Your Game scorecard will help you identify how strong you are in each of those games. Please visit changeyourgamescorecard.com for more information and get your report today. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the next EnSpirit podcast, and welcome Sadie. How are you, Sadie?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Sadie, do you know why I paused there? Because I nearly said your maiden name, and then I forgot your. I know your married name, but the pronunciation, because Sadie Hobson was your maiden name, was that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And your current name is?
Restorick.
Restorick, and that's why I paused. I thought,
yeah, it throws quite a few people. It's Cornish.
It's Cornish?
It is, yeah.
Oh, right.
Origins are in Cornwall.
Oh, does he have that Cornish twang?
He doesn't. No, he doesn't. He would like to move back down there though and regain the twang.
Right. Okay, we might talk about that. That might be one of your sort of bucket list ambitions. Great. So, Sadie, we've known each other sort of in the sort of entrepreneurial space for a number of years. You know, we've crossed paths. I've had the fortunate opportunity to speak at some of your events, and you're very much this advocate around mental health, but also, you know, dealing with stress and things around workplace. But before we go there, I really wanted to understand more about your journey and whether entrepreneurship was something natural to you, or did it sort of fall on your lap and you sort of took the opportunities? So where did it all start for you?
It wasn't necessarily a conscious decision. I didn't wake up one morning and think, yes, I want to have my own business and start my own empire. It was more just natural progression. I think I've always been a person that sort of thinks outside the box and always questions things. And in every job I've had, I've questioned about processes, the way things are done, and just try to think about different ways of doing things or improving, making them more efficient. So I think I've naturally got that within my nature. And I'm also naturally somebody who likes to try and make an impact, try and make a difference in what I do. I'm very much not one for getting complacent. I always strive to go above and beyond and do better and be better. So I think I've always had those traits that lend themselves to being an entrepreneur. And it's not necessarily the case that, you know, way back then, I didn't necessarily associate that with me being an entrepreneur. I just thought that was me as a person. But in hindsight, I can certainly see why those characteristics lended themselves to me going down this path, so to speak. Well, this journey, as you said.
Indeed. So when you way back, did you go to university? Did you go straight to the job? What did you do?
Yeah, so I finished my A-levels, took a couple of gap years, went travelling, worked as a chef in the Alps, went around Australia, did a few really cool
You work
things.
as a chef in the Alps. Don't skim over that.
Yeah, I did a season in the Alps. Went out there as a sort of third chef, basically preparing desserts and salads, and then
nice.
Opportunity arose to be head chef, which I took.
Wow.
So yeah, head chef in a hotel, 160 guests to cook 4 or 3 courses every night.
What kind of cuisine was that?
Sorry?
What kind of cuisine was that?
It wasn't French. No, standard English fare, to be honest. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was more the volumes and the ordering, particularly of the produce. I had to very quickly adapt to being able to do that in French. So I constantly had my little translation book with me. Didn't really have Google at hand in my pocket. So yeah, that was an interesting time. Snowboarding every day. So yeah, wow. Really was living the dream. Yeah. And then following year went traveling around Australia. So greedy 2 gap years, but then went on to go to university in Bournemouth and studied communication. So particularly went into things like organisational dynamics, training needs analysis, how we communicate, interpersonal relationships, etc. So really sort of delved into quite a broad subject, isn't it? Communication. I mean, really go in any direction with that. But that I think established my interest to understand how people interact, particularly at work within organisations, and really how to identify where there's gaps or needs for improvement in the ways that people interact and come together.
And is that something that you sort of grew to understand or be interested in through the gap year in traveling Australia, or was when you chose to do communication, it came out of that?
Definitely the latter. I chose the degree because it was so broad. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to go in to do, but I wanted to be working with people. So I thought, build on my psychology A level and think more about, well, communicating. If I can communicate effectively in lots of different ways, then that's going to make you successful in whatever you do. But I felt it was a good taster to explore different areas that I could take with that. So yes, it was definitely the latter that I established, that I was really interested in that. I wanted to build on it further because of the degree.
And so that took you into the workplace, or did you start your own thing from there?
No, initially I came back, I graduated and worked just doing admin and family business while I was trying to establish what I wanted to do. And then an opportunity arose to work for a large recruitment company, largest in the UK. And it seemed like a natural fit because I had this desire to make a difference and help improve the quality of people's lives. And we spend a lot of time working, so it's quite nice to enjoy what you're doing, as we all know. So it seemed like a natural fit to work in this type of role. And it suited my nature to explore, say, the opportunity or vacancy at an organisation, to explore the people that are looking for work and see how they fit together. That's a part of it that I really, really enjoyed. So yes, went into that role as a consultant.
And that was in recruitment?
Yeah, recruitment consultant. Yeah, I was initially recruiting for accountancy and finance professionals. Okay. So anything from accounts assistant up to part qualified accountant.
Cool. And how many years did you spend there?
3.
3. And then the world of business and entrepreneurship came to you?
Do you know what? It was my experiences whilst in that role. I struggled because of this, as I mentioned earlier, this nature that I've got to push myself really, really hard. I found myself working stupid hours. I was on target to be made a manager, and I was not supported as well as I could be. And I went down a bit of a spiral with my own mental health. I was always quite a naturally anxious person as a youngster. So I think that really was compounded within that role and that sales role and the pressure that came with that. And I didn't really feel I was that, as I say, supported within that process. And again, people didn't really recognise, and I was told I wasn't cut out for the profession, basically. I was signed off and visited GP, and they said, they firstly said that I needed antidepressants and tried to send me on these different routes. But I kind of had a deep understanding that wasn't the case. It was the situation, and I needed to learn how to deal with the stress of what was happening. So that sent me on that path of starting to seek different qualifications in that field. I returned back to work, feeling a lot better and feeling a lot more enlightened, and wanting to not only apply these strategies myself, but also help the people that I worked with to deal with their pressure in a more effective way. It is a high pressure job. Anything in business development is going to be. But I also started to recognise the people coming to me to seek a new job were saying that I hate my work, I hate my boss, I want to leave. And I'd say, well, why are you leaving? And fundamentally, the reason they were leaving are things that could have been changed. You didn't need to be in that position. And then the organisation would come to me and say, we need to re-recruit for a finance director. Do you know why that one left? And they weren't really going through the processes of a robust exit interview. They weren't learning from it. And fundamentally, people leave their manager, don't they? They don't necessarily leave any other factor. And it just shone this huge light of need, that people need to wake up and open their eyes to the simple steps that could be taken within a workplace to make sure people feel valued, acknowledged, they don't get stressed, they don't reach burnout. And yeah, it just all came together really at that point. I thought, I can actually do this, I can actually make a difference. That sounds really cheesy, I know, but it did. It just sort of made me feel like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is what I can do and I want to do. So that was the start, I guess, of that entrepreneur journey.
So then you thought, I'm going to do this, as opposed to trying to find a company that offers those services, you went down the road of, okay, I'm going to start my own business around this. Okay.
Yes.
And that was when?
2010, June 2010.
Okay, and have a look back.
No. It's it has been quite a journey of ups and downs, but there wasn't really many people talking about stress in the workplace, certainly not mental health in the workplace when I started. So that was a bit of an obstacle, but it also meant there was less competition. So once I was in the door and people were starting to realise that this is something they need to be doing, that it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And starting to understand that taking care of the biggest asset, their people, it makes business sense. It's not something nice and fluffy like giving them free fruit on a Friday. It's something they need to be doing and are really implementing every day. So once I got in the door, it was something that I continued to build on relationships with organisations, constantly working on their policies and strategies. So
for people listening to this, there might be people listening to this thinking, because of we're recording this during this pandemic and the COVID period, that people will be put in situations where they're thinking, I've always wanted to run my business and start a business, and this is probably giving an opportunity to do so. You mentioned that word, foot in the door. I'm sure intellectually people know what that means, but in practical terms, what did you have to do to get your foot in the door?
I applied my learnings from recruitment, to be honest, and just sent out emails, mail shots, knocked on doors, made a lot of phone calls. Just really, it was more a soft approach. I think there's lots of different ways that you can approach your subject matter, because legally a company has to be demonstrating their compliance with stress regulations. There's a lot of legal ways that you could approach this, but I was more, I want to help your staff thrive, I want to help your business thrive, and what are you doing, how can we improve it? So it was more going the consultative route rather than the direct hard sales, but it was literally door knocking equivalent. So not necessarily something that people can do at the moment, certainly not in person, but it was sheer tenacity, sheer determination, and sheer belief in what I was doing. I think because I'd genuinely been there, I thought, no, I can make a difference to you. And I think that drove my confidence, if you like.
I think the basic tenets of foot in the door are always that we might have different tools and resources now to do it, but the basic tenets of, like you say, trying to get in front of someone, whether it's through an email or a leaflet or a social media post or whatever, or a podcast like this or whatever it may be, to start the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And just keep up that momentum as well. I think sometimes there's a tendency to do one thing and think, oh, that didn't work, but it's just keeping up with that sense of consistency, which is something that I've learned over the years, that you can't just try one thing and think that approach failed. You have to be really, really strict with yourself and keep to it.
When you look at your journey, hindsight's the best tool and best sort of research book, if you like, and we could use hindsight. But when you look back, what are probably some of the challenges that you faced that at the start you never envisaged you'd face those growing your business?
I think being my own biggest critic, I think, was a huge factor that I have had to tackle for quite a long time. So the imposter syndrome that can I do this? Can I really, achieve this? Is something that I've had to overcome actively. I think the isolation of starting a business, going from a massive, massive company where you've got, someone to talk to, if you have had, say, some bad sales calls or somebody's hung up on you, or just when you're feeling a bit flat, you're around all this energy and it picks you up. And I think that I really, really missed that sense of connection with other people who understood what I was doing. So that, I think, was something that I had to actively work to overcome and understand just who I was surrounding myself with, whether they were aligned with my mindset. So that was a big one. I think another point as well is my own mental health. I mentioned earlier that I've, my experience with burnout and anxiety, etc., it makes me very passionate about what I do. But unfortunately, due to some personal situations in a relationship I was in, I was diagnosed with CPTSD, which is complex PTSD. And that really impacted upon me. And things that I'd done in my business quite readily and quite easily, suddenly I found very difficult. For example, being on a packed tube, going to see a client, I experienced panic attacks, standing in front of a group. Sometimes I'd be fine, sometimes I would be a wreck. And just adjusting to that and accepting that just because I work in mental health and I help others in the workplace, I'm still a human being. I'm still going to have my demons. I'm still going to have things that I need to deal with. And I think that acceptance, that didn't make me bad at my job. It just made me a human being. So I think that realization that expressing vulnerability is a really good thing. That, you know, putting things out there and saying, yeah, I suffer with this, I experience that, it's a really positive thing. And that's the sort of thing that, ironically, I encourage managers to do, because it normalizes that conversation around mental health. But I felt like a fraud saying that I struggled with something for a while. So yeah, again, like you say, it's all part of the enrichment of the journey, I guess, and the processes we move through. But hindsight is a fine thing. Biggest teacher, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because it's very easy to say, well, you teach helping others to alleviate stress and deal with mental health. If you can't get yourself sorted out, then who are you? But the irony is actually the very fact that you can be vulnerable and open to, look, I'm not a robot, I have stuff going on, and it's about just using those tools every little day. Some days you just got to accept it's just not there, and you just move on. But that's the strength in that, and I think that's really quite brave of you, but also professional for you to talk about that in terms of your own vulnerabilities. Because whether you're selling widgets or whether you're like doing what you're doing in terms of training about how to deal with stress in the workplace, there's a process there. There's the very thing that you offer the business, your clients, and how you do it, the operations of the business, the sales of the business, and marketing, because that has its own stresses.
Yeah,
Did you believe the way business was supposed to be run, and what you've experienced in the last 9-10 years is what you expected?
I think all the different hats that you have to wear is, I think it's easy to underestimate. I think it's easy to underestimate how much of an impact that can have and how draining that can be. Because, you know, just because you're good at selling widgets, your example, you know, do you know how to do the accounting, the invoicing, the selling of the digital marketing? You know, there's so many different things that come into it. It's not just selling the widgets, and how time consuming that can be is really, really easy to underestimate. And it's almost frustrating, particularly if you really love what you do and you're passionate about what you do. That's what you want to be doing. You don't necessarily want to be doing all the admin, basically, the operational side, but you have to do that. And I think it's quite easy for people going into perhaps starting their own business, or people sort of on the outside looking in. They think it's all glamorous. They think, oh, you work your own timetable, you do what you want to do. Oh, it's great. Oh, I finished early, have you? And it's like, yeah, that's because I was working till 2:00 this morning. So yeah, it's not all glory. It's a wonderful and rewarding thing to do, but it's not all bells and whistles. It's not all, you know, just living the dream, you know, doing half days, etc. And I think that is something that I underestimated, and I think a lot of other people do as well.
I say that often. The very thing that you do, people think just because I'm good at the thing, in your case, you know, helping executives with, you know, stress relieving activities and lifestyles, is the presumption is you can run a business around that, and it requires the same skill sets. It's a different skill sets, and that I like to distinguish, whereby the very thing that you do is not a reflection of whether you can run the business around it. And don't think that if the business isn't going well, it means you're not good at your thing. It's just different challenges amongst that. And you put that quite eloquently in terms of saying that, yes, I know my stuff, but it doesn't mean that the challenges of running the business are still not going to be there.
Yeah, and I think that's part of going back to what we were talking about earlier about expressing vulnerability. I think also you have to accept things that you aren't very good at that need to be done for running a business. For example, I'm terrible with numbers. I'm really, really not very good with figures. I'm not. And I acknowledge and accept that. So somebody else does that for me, because it's stupid, it's ignorant to keep trying to push your head against that brick wall and try and force something. And I think part of it, again, on the journey has been accepting I'm really, really, really good at this stuff. I'm okay at this stuff. I might not find it that interesting, but I can do it. I've just got to, you know, motivate myself to do it. This I shouldn't touch. This I should go nowhere near. Somebody else needs to do that for me. So I think that, again, that realization that you can't do it all, you're not good at it all. So allow yourself the time and energy to do what you're good at, what you contribute the most in, what you can bring those value to, and the other stuff, just delegate. Ditch, get rid of it somehow, because it's a waste of your time, and we don't have unlimited time and energy. So
And some people might think, is it easy to delegate? Have you found that if you get your mindset right, it's relatively easy to delegate and actually you find more space to do what you want to do?
I have over the years, yeah. I think when it's your own business, if you have got the entrepreneurial mindset, then a lot of the time you do like to have control. I think that naturally comes with it. So relinquishing that control is difficult. But also, if it's your baby and you've developed this and grown it, and you develop, really long-lasting relationships. I said earlier about getting the foot in the door. You know how hard that is to do. So the thought of somebody potentially ruining that in some way for you is scary. Really, it's terrifying. So it's, again, that heightened awareness about yourself and the barriers that are stopping you to delegating, to, perhaps thinking that somebody can do something better than you or differently to you. And that's okay, it is difficult, but I think over time with experience, and you can start to weigh up the benefits of that delegation and thinking, no, actually, if I give that to that person, I can be doing X, Y, Z, which is where my value is. So I think that's the way I've approached it, and thinking, yes, I might want to do it all, but I can't. So what do I want to do? What am I good at? And what can go the other direction to somebody else's at?
Yeah. You mentioned about some of your own mental health struggles and the vulnerability around that. When you look back in your time, what would you say your biggest obstacles or hurdles have been, and how have you overcome them?
Trying to keep pushing through and suppressing it, and thinking that acknowledging it meant that I wasn't very good at what I was doing. And also the fact, because I've got numerous qualifications around mental health in the workplace, I've got a master's in it, to think that I can't work it out. Again, it's that sense of vulnerability. It's like, no, you can work out what to do. You know all the techniques, all the strategies, just do them, just deploy them. And it's that really reminding yourself that being a resilient person isn't like cruising through life, that everything's fine and rosy. It's recognizing when you haven't got the tools to deal with something and deploying, taking action. And I remember a few years back, I went through a really, really tough time, and I sought out seeing a therapist for a while. And so many of my friends who are close to me and knew what I'd gone through and knew what I do as a job, but were kind of a bit baffled, because they said, well, you do this every day for work. You train, how can you? I said, no, it's because I do this for work, and I understand it. I understand that I don't know what to do with this situation, and I understand it's affecting me. So I need to do something differently. I need to go for help and advice. Now, what I learned during that time, I can now apply in the future when I face difficult situations. So I have learned and grown from it. But that moment in time, I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to manage. So I think it is that, just the emphasis that asking for help is a good thing. And sometimes we'll need to do that. Again, it comes back to, we're only human. We're not replaced by robots just yet. So yeah, I just think that that's helped me along the way, is establishing that sometimes you do need to reach out and get help and support.
I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this who are females, who are either running their businesses or looking to run. What are some of the unique challenges that you feel women business owners have to cope with, that us as men wouldn't even have to or even understand? And how have you dealt with that?
I think particularly what I do and the industry I work within, I think it does lend itself to being listened to more as a woman. So I do think that that's an advantage in a lot of senses. But I think it's just that balance, that work-life balance of constantly having to, have a lot of roles and responsibilities to wear. But I wouldn't personally honestly say I've encountered significant obstacles or challenges because of my gender. But maybe that is the industry I'm in. But the only thing I can think of is the fact that you do almost put yourself under the pressure of having to deal with the home. I haven't got children, so I should imagine that is something that a lot of women would have to juggle that I don't. I've got dogs that act like children. But,
husband acts like children?
Husband acts like a child sometimes also. But,
only sometimes?
Yeah. But no, I haven't faced that much, particularly in going out and securing business. But I do think that's because I'm in the wellbeing sector. And I am quite direct in the way that I communicate. So I think possibly that comes into it as well. I don't know.
Right, okay. So when you look at the work that you do and what we've experienced so far in the COVID pandemic and what's going on there, first question is, what's this period given you? as an individual and as a business owner?
I think it's given me, and also a lot of people, perspective. It's given us time to reevaluate, and everyone has been forced to slow down, myself included. That I travel extensively, did travel extensively to work with clients. So it was a lot of time on the go, a lot of time constantly thinking about other people's needs. But we've all been forced to slow down, and I have been grounded more. So it is a time to be thinking about what I'm actually doing, the direction I'm headed. Am I doing things that are the best value of my time? So just redirect my energy. I think it's also given me the opportunity to launch a book, which is on my list that I always wanted to do. So that was great to tick that off. But no, it's just been time to reflect and reevaluate and think about where my priorities are, my values are, where I want to be headed, where I want to be in 2 years, 5 years. That's not something that's always necessarily a strength of mine, is long-term strategy and goal setting. Mm-hmm. So it's given me that opportunity to create a vision board, to be thinking, what am I doing? Where am I going? Because constantly juggling, aren't we? We're constantly juggling those balls in the air, and we just go. And, before you know it, a year's gone, 2 years have gone. So now I feel a lot more structured in what I'm doing. I feel a lot more clear on where I'm heading, why I'm heading there, what success looks to me in the short term and long term. And it's just clarity. I suppose that's the most simple way to put it. I just feel clearer in where I'm headed.
And do you think this period gave you that, or do you think that would have occurred but maybe
No.
taken longer?
I think this time has given me that, absolutely, because it's forced me to slow down and just rethink what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And There's a lot I'll keep, but there's a lot of things I think, no, I need to create a shift there, just to make sure that I'm staying on the right track.
Pause for 1 minute. Just want to, before I carry on, do you want me to ask you about what happened to you? You happy to talk about that and the challenges?
What, the CPTSD?
No, when didn't you? Sorry, I thought you didn't lose a child, or didn't you get pregnant?
Oh, the ectopic. Yeah. That was what I was talking about. The reason I saw a therapist.
Yeah. So do you want to go in more detail for that? Shall we just, in terms of what that meant you to, in terms of life perspective? This is not recorded. Yeah. Okay. So I'll do that again to record. So I'll come up with a couple of questions right now. Starting recording again now. So you mentioned you saw a therapist. Was that related to work stuff, personal stuff? What was the instigate for that?
It's personal stuff. It's a personal situation. I was pregnant after lots of miscarriages, so it was very, very special and exciting time. And when we went for the first scan, unfortunately, they discovered that it was actually ectopic and needed to rush me through for surgery to remove my fallopian tube and the pregnancy as well. This was a couple of days before Christmas. So it went from something that was really, really exciting, that I was really, really, obviously first scan, within minutes, to going through to surgery. So that really threw me. That really, really threw me. And I always think that I'm a very resilient person through other things I've gone through in my life, but that just knocked me. But it is often the things that we haven't had any experience of dealing with before, that it's quite natural for us not to feel that we've got the resources at our fingertips to know what to do. And I was surrounded by love and support, but I just wanted to withdraw and isolate and to put barriers up. And it was just a really, really difficult time. And hence I had to reach out to get expert support, because even though there was a lot of love around with my friends and family, I needed an understanding of exactly what was going on, not just in my head, but in my body as well. The hormone shift, the physical recovery that was needed after surgery. My normal coping strategies would involve things like walking the dogs, going for a run, go to the gym, and I couldn't do any of that. So suddenly I was confronted with this notion that everything I usually did to cope, I couldn't do. So I had to develop new techniques and new strategies, and I had to just sit with my mind. And I think that gave me a sense of perspective of how I typically would cope. And a lot of my techniques for managing situations that I struggle with is to box, to run. They're all quite high impact and high intensity, and they're very distracting because of that. I wasn't ever somebody who practiced things like mindfulness or yoga. And I think it was that time with my own mind that I was almost trying to escape. So that really taught me that you've got to be still with your own head and that with the thoughts within that head and deal with them. So that showed me a lot. That did show me a lot about my own mechanisms and about new ones that I could use to help me in difficult situations.
So that showed you looked at you did a lot of self-reflection in terms of how you were coping with stuff before and post that episode. What about the way you looked at your business? Did that change?
Yeah, again, it was just about what I was doing, the choices I was making, what was really, really important to me. And yeah, just I started to create much more effective boundaries as well around my time, around my energy, around who I spent time with as well. I think it's remarkable, again, when you're given that time to reflect and you go through an experience like that, you start to review and think about who's around you, what's around you, what you're exposing yourself to. It showed me in my life who was there for me and who wasn't. You know, it really shone a light on me as a business owner, and the different changes I wanted to make coming out of that. And I think, you know, it's certainly something I teach and something I try and live, is the fact that, you know, whatever difficulty, whatever adversity, if you take something from it and learn something from it, it can be an opportunity, it can be a positive. And as traumatic and awful as that was, I learned from it. So and I can apply those learnings for myself, my business, the people I work with. You know, that's the wonderful thing about what I do. If I learn about life, mental health, resilience, I can then add it to my teaching. So it's great. It makes a lot of sense.
What do you think the agenda around mental health now, especially with this period? Do you think post, you know, people talking about there's going to be more remote working, there's going to be, you know, how you create culture in teams is different. What are some of the things that companies do you think need to look at proactively, not reactively, in terms of handling, because is workplace stress just going to be moved to workplace stress at home? It's still there, but it might not be in an office environment.
I think the biggest challenge, certainly with the clients that I'm working with, is that there's this assumption that working from home, flexi working, remote working, whatever you call it, that people are obviously a lot happier, a lot healthier, the work-life balance improves, but it's actually far, far from it. The level of disconnect and disengagement that's starting to emerge, what I was talking about earlier in relation to isolation, how that affects things like morale, motivation, you know, it is starting to have an impact. And I don't think clients and companies are aware of just how much they need to do and how much they need to invest in keeping that sense of connection, engagement with their staff and with their people. I think, you know, whilst at the moment there's a lot of concern about things like job insecurity or lack of stability, particularly with the economy, I think, you know, when the dust settles in years to come, people will reflect back on this time and they'll think about how supported and valued they felt by their employer. And when the time is right, they will move on based on what their companies are doing right now. So it is a time, like you said, they need to be really, really proactive. They need to be engaging with their staff, asking what they need, asking them what they want, asking them how they can help, and being so mindful of people's changing situations. So even in the last few weeks, we've had people's kids going back to school so they can perhaps do more work. And then within 2 days, they've got a cold. So they're back off on isolating so they can do less work. You know, it's constantly changing. So companies need to be really, really in tune with each employee. Managers need to be trained how to do that so that they can change accordingly and make sure that they're making sure that people feel that there's still that sense of connection.
So what's the future for you and your company? Where do you has you said you've reflected more and your perspective on your business changed in terms of your goals and what you want to achieve? Has that enhanced? Has that changed because of this period? Where do you see yourself going?
So typically over the years, I've always been, and you know this, there's two businesses. This one does this one does that, and I've looked at them quite fixed in that way. And over recent months, like a lot of people, I guess, you know, it's about being more fluid in what I do. So I've basically been working with organizations as a consultant. The digital platform might suit, but we're also perhaps doing some corporate training. You know, it's just about a bespoke solution that fits the needs of business right now. So that's what I'm working on doing, is developing creative solutions that map on the needs of their people, their business, and putting that in place. So it's a really, really exciting time because that's what I like doing. I like developing strategies and solutions and writing training programs. So that's really where I'm pushing forwards with that is, making sure that companies have got things in place, not just for right now, but for 6 months, a year's time, and that they know what they're doing to optimise the staff's mental well-being.
And what's your view in terms of what business will look like? Do you think it's going to be like people just working from home, allowing for the fact that there's challenges there, or do you think there'll be a time whereby offices or office space will look different now, or will it go back to how it was?
I don't think it will go back to how it was. I think it will be just generally a lot more flexible. There's been a lot of conversations I've had over the years about remote working, companies saying that wouldn't work here, and it's had to. So it's forced their hand. And I think that there's got to be consideration that some people do need to be at work, or some people like to be at work, and you do need that for that sense of connection. So I think, again, it's going to become more fluid, more balanced, more blended in the approach. But it's certainly going to, I think, move critically away from the 9 till 5 typical commute. I think people's hours will shift, that, people naturally start to learn their own chronotype, when they work best, and that they shouldn't necessarily be in 9 till 5. Some people, myself included, are better sort of starting 5 in the morning, but certainly finishing a lot earlier on a good day. But it's about starting to adapt and start to basically make the business fit the people's needs, not the other way around. Yeah. So I think that'll be a good opportunity for people to start thinking about how they work best, where they work best, the working environment, the working culture. All of these has to come under really close scrutiny right now.
I think it's really, a lot of the conversations have been accelerated because of this period, especially around workplace, but also digitization, how we digitize things. So what's your view on terms of what's digital's role? Is it an enabler for mental well-being? Is it a cause of mental stress?
I think it's like anything, though. It's balance. Amount of times we've gone from the start of all of this, people feeling anxious about being on video, moving into saying, this is great, let's have a Zoom quiz on a Friday, but then talking about Zoom burnout because they're on the screen too much. And it's all about having that sense of balance. Tech is a wonderful enabler. It enables us to do so many things, have so much flexibility. You think when BlackBerrys first came out, we're like, oh, we can email from the train. Yeah. And it was all exciting, wasn't it? But now it's like we feel tethered to them. And it's the same with videos. I put together with clients communication strategies and ask managers to work with their teams to say, right, what do we use email for? What do we pick up the phone for? What do we use video for? Because we all tend to get quite reliant on one form of on medium for communicating. We all know what it's like when you've got like billions of emails coming through and you think, why don't you just call me? Or getting on a video Zoom meeting and thinking, why are we doing it like this? What do we all need to be here? Does it need to be a video? And I just think that companies need to be a lot clearer on what they're using tech for and whether it's the most suitable tool to use it for. So it just needs to be a sense of balance. And people need to know, big thing as well with videos is that people need to be really clear on what they can and can't dress like, if it's okay if their kids stumble in, because it makes them anxious. And it's not until the company or the manager sets the tone and says, bring them in, we don't care, be in your pajamas, we don't care. It might be a meeting with the client where they can't, but if they know that 7 times out of 10 they can, it's just one less thing to worry about, isn't it? So it's all about that communication, having a strategy and having a sense of balance.
Fantastic, great. Before we finish, I've got one last question. Do you are you unemployable now? Do you have any regrets getting into running your own business?
No.
You paused. That was the longest pause. That was the longest pause for this interview.
No, it's because I've had this conversation with a lot of people recently, because there has been some challenges experienced this year with the business, because I have had to pivot the way I do some things. And, some people have said you miss having security and stability. One, I don't think anyone's got that really in spades at the moment. But no, I don't regret it. I think I love what I do. I absolutely love what I do. And I wouldn't change it.
Fantastic, great. Sadie, it's fascinating talking to you. I loved some of your insights and observations to growing your own business. So if people want to know more about you or hear about what you do and maybe want to get in contact from either a professional or just love your energy, how can they do that?
So the best place to visit is the website. So it's weworkwell.co.uk, or you can find us on social media, Facebook, We Work Well, or Twitter, or Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn under Sadie Restorick.
Restorick. All right. Okay. So if they look for Sadie Hobson, will they find you?
They will. Hobson's in brackets. It's quite frustrating because I've had so much pressure, so much media in Hobson, but now I'm sort of starting again under Restorick, so I've got to build up the portfolio again.
Right. It's like keeping your stage name, isn't it? Keep the stage name, and the married name is for sort of personal stuff.
Yeah.
I've
struggled to do that though too long, but yeah.
It's all good. It's all good.
Sadie, migration. Perhaps that's the biggest challenge I face as a woman, is dealing with the maiden name changing.
Yeah. Do you keep your name, or do you change your maiden name? Absolutely. Great. Good. Listen, Sadie, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure people will be fascinated with your story and enjoy what you talked about. And like you said, we'll put all the links to your website and bits and pieces on the podcast. And I wish you well for the future.
Thanks again, Baji. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening. To find out more about myself or the Change Your Game Scorecard, you can visit changeyourgamescorecard.com, where you can find out how strong your game is and get a full detailed report. Also, if you found this episode useful, please do leave a rating or a review in iTunes to help others discover it too. Until the next time, my name is Sadie Restorick.